you for joining this edition of News Today, a series where we briefly discuss and analyze important news of the day. Without delay, let's explore the headlines first. PRS Legislative Research released vital stats on functioning of the 17th Lok Sabha. 22nd Law Commission of India or LCI submits its 286th report titled A Comprehensive Review of the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897. Department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Health and Family Welfare released report on quality of medical education. First Global Environment Facility Council meeting of Global Biodiversity Framework Fund held in United States. UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Center has launched a report on state of the world's migratory species. Observations of black hole in the galaxy Messier 87 data captured by Event Horizon Telescope in 2018 shows persistent shadow of the black hole. Starting with the first news for the day, PRS Legislative Research released vital stats on functioning of the 17th Lok Sabha. The 17th Lok Sabha held its session between June 2019 and February 2024. During this period, it held 274 sittings and passed 179 bills. The question hour functioned for 60% of scheduled time in Lok Sabha and 52% in Rajya Sabha. This question hour was previously cancelled in monsoon session of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let us first start by discussing the main issues arising out of Lok Sabha functioning. Fewest sittings amongst all full-term Lok Sabhas have been analysed with 206 instances of suspension of the members of the parliament. The average annual sitting days has come down to 55 from 135 in the first Lok Sabha. For the very first time, Lok Sabha did not elect any deputy speaker for the entire duration. The Article 93 of the Constitution requires the Lok Sabha to elect a speaker and deputy speaker as soon as may be. Only 16% of bills have referred to committees for detailed scrutiny with passage of majority of the bills without recorded voting. Meanwhile, 35% of bills have passed with less than an hour of discussion. Moreover, the time spent on budget discussions has reduced with about 80% of the budget voted without discussion. Now, let's also discuss way forward for improving Lok Sabha functioning. More frequent sittings of the Parliament, the detailed scrutiny of bills with adequate discussion and referral to the committees. Lastly, adequate discussion time for opposition and constructive consultations between parties. Moving on to the next news. The 22nd Law Commission of India submits its 286th report titled A Comprehensive Review of the Epidemic Diseases Act or EDA 1897. As per the 22nd Law Commission of India or LCI, the existing legislation that is EDA 1897 does not comprehensively address the concerns pertaining to containment and management of the future epidemics in the country. First, let us start by getting to know about the Epidemic Diseases Act or the EDA 1897. The EDA provides guidelines for prevention of spreading of epidemic diseases. It granted extensive powers to state governments to regulate, prevent and control of epidemic diseases. The Epidemic Diseases Bill was introduced in the Council of Governor-General of India in Calcutta by John Woodburn. The colonial government of Lord Elgin II introduced EDA to tackle the epidemic of bubonic plague that had spread in erstwhile Bombay Presidency in 1896. In the light of the violence faced by the healthcare workers during COVID-19, Epidemic Diseases Amendment Act 2020 was enacted which amended the EDA 1897. The Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 also faces some limitations. These are: the colonial era law has proved to be incapable of handling the changing variants of communicable diseases. It does not define an epidemic or an infectious disease and does not differentiate between an outbreak, epidemic and pandemic. The lack of decentralization and demarcation of power between center, state and local authorities has proved to be a challenge. This Act further lacks stipulated guidelines that will be followed pertaining to isolation and quarantine. Lastly, this Act makes no mention for safe disposal of infectious medical waste and human corpses. To overcome these issues, the committee has given several recommendations. These are: Defining terminologies like outbreak and epidemic in comprehensive manner can further help in awareness about the diseases. Establishing a dedicated standard operating procedure to respond against pandemic. Additionally, states should collaborate with the center in preparing epidemic plan and revise it at regular intervals. Lastly, broad framework for imposing lockdown and restrictions on movement of people and vehicles can further benefit the issue. Moving on to the next news. Department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Health and Family Welfare released report on quality of medical education. The primary objective of this report was to find areas of improvement to ensure that medical graduates are well equipped to navigate the evolving landscape of healthcare delivery. Before starting, let us first get to know about the medical regulations in India. These are the National Medical Commission, the Dental Council of India, the Pharmacy Council of India, the Allied Health Professional Council of India, and the Indian Nursing Council. Coming back, now let us discuss the status of medical education in India. India is one of the largest medical education systems with 702 medical colleges. India has achieved a doctor-to-population ratio of 1:856. WHO has recommended this ratio to be 1:1000. The actual health research expenditure as a percentage of GDP in India has constantly remained at 0.02 since 2021 to 22. Further, let us discuss the issues faced by the medical education system. Firstly, the peculiar paradox. The system produces significant number of physicians while many Indian students pursue their medical education abroad. Also, the shortage of seats at both undergraduate and postgraduate level acts as a challenge. Additionally, there is an uneven distribution of medical colleges with high concentration in urban areas. Non-availability of sufficient funds for medical research adds to the concern. Lastly, there is a non-optimal use of the existing infrastructure. To overcome these challenges, the committee has given several recommendations. Expansion of government's existing scheme for establishment of new medical colleges can help in increasing medical seats. Streamlining the recruitment process to prevent ghost faculty in medical colleges can further help the cause. Also, leverage technology for distance learning and virtual classrooms can be added to address the concern of seat shortage. The NMC maintains a real-time national database of doctors and undertake a comparative study of best practices of its parallel organization in various countries. Lastly, chalking out comprehensive India-specific plan for next 20 to 25 years and encouraging private investment can further benefit the system.
Moving on to the next news. First Global Environment Facility Council meeting of Global Biodiversity Framework Fund held in United States. Global Biodiversity Framework Fund aims to scale up financing for implementation of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It was ratified by 186 countries and launched in 2023 at 7th Global Environment Facility Assembly in Vancouver, Canada. Decisions of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund Council are to be taken by consensus, and the World Bank has been invited to serve as trustee of Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. Before proceeding, let's first discuss and understand about Global Environment Facility. Established in 1992 Rio Earth Summit, it is a partnership of 18 agencies to address the world's most challenging environmental issues. Global Environment Facility's main governing body council comprises 32 members appointed by constituencies of Global Environment Facility member countries, in which 14 and 16 from developed and developing countries respectively, and 2 economies in transition. Global Environment Facility serves as a financial mechanism to 5 conventions. These are Convention on Biological Diversity, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and Minamata Convention on Mercury. Now let's have a look at the key highlights of the meeting. Global Environment Facility's member governments have agreed to invest $1.1 billion for international action on biodiversity, climate change, nature renewal, and pollution control. They endorsed $203 million for 21 climate change adaptation projects funded by Least Developed Countries Fund and Special Climate Change Fund. Moreover, Spain announced 10 million euros to the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, adding to contributions announced by Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, and Japan. Lastly, Global Biodiversity Framework Fund Resource Allocation Policy and Project Cycle Policy were approved to allocate donor funds based on availability. At last, let's also talk about Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It was adopted at COP15 held in Montreal to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework has set 23 targets to be achieved by 2030, which include 30% conservation of land and sea, 50% reduction of invasive species, raising at least $200 billion per year. Moving on to the next news. UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Center has launched a report on state of the world's migratory species. This first ever report was launched by Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals at 14th Conference of Parties in Uzbekistan. Before proceeding, first let's discuss about Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals or CMS. Signed in 1979, CMS Bonn Convention is an environmental treaty under the aegis of United Nations Environment Programme. It provides a global platform for conservation and sustainable use of migratory animals and their habitats. If we talk about CMS appendices, then these are Appendix 1, which contains migratory species that have been assessed as being in danger of extinction. And Appendix 2 comprises migratory species which require international agreements for their conservation. CMS has 133 parties, including India. Now let's have a look at the key findings of the report. 1 in 5 CMS listed species are threatened with extinction and 44% have a decreasing population trend. 82% of Appendix 1 species are threatened with extinction and 76% are declining. 18% of Appendix 2 species are globally threatened and 42% have a decreasing trend. 97% of CMS listed fish are threatened with extinction. Moreover, extinction risks have been growing for both CMS listed species and all migratory species. Globally, 399 migratory species threatened or near threatened with extinction are not currently listed under CMS. There are two main threats to migratory species. These include habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation over exploitation. Some other threats include climate change and severe weather, pollution, invasive species, and diseases. Further, if we talk about the importance of migratory species, then these include climate change mitigation, regulate ecosystem through predation and grazing, important source of food and ecotourism attractions. Now let's also have a look at the recommendations of the report. First is to identify, protect, connect and restore sites for migratory species. Also, there is an important emphasis on strengthening collaborative international efforts to tackle overexploitation. Moreover, it says to scale up efforts to tackle climate change and light, noise, chemical and plastic pollution. And lastly, to prioritize research on data-deficient migratory species. Moving ahead, observations of black hole in the galaxy Messier 87 data captured by Event Horizon Telescope in 2018 shows persistent shadow of the black hole. In 2018, observations revealed a familiar shadow of the same size Event Horizon Telescope found in 2017 when it took the first image of a black hole. A black hole is an astronomical object with a gravitational pull so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape it. Black hole's gravitational pull becomes this strong at the event horizon, the boundary from which a particle cannot escape. Event horizon captures any light passing through it, and the distorted space-time around it causes light to be redirected through gravitational lensing. These two effects produce a dark zone that astronomers refer to as the event horizon shadow. Further, let's discuss and know what gravitational lensing is. It occurs when a massive celestial body such as galaxy cluster causes sufficient curvature of space-time for the path of light around it to be visibly bent as if by a lens. The body causing the light to curve is accordingly called a gravitational lens. It is an observable example of Einstein's theory of general relativity. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, time and space are fused together in a quantity known as space-time. Massive objects cause space-time to curve, and gravity is simply the curvature of space-time. As light travels through space-time, the path taken by light will also be curved by an object's mass. Now let's discuss and understand about Event Horizon Telescope. It is a network of synchronized radio observatories around the world that combine as a single telescope with an aperture the size of Earth used to observe sources of radio light associated with black holes. It links radio telescopes across the globe to create an Earth-sized interferometer using very long baseline interferometry. Presently, no Indian radio telescope is part of Event Horizon Telescope.
As we conclude today's main news, let's take a look at some quick updates. The absence of a full bench is affecting functioning of the Securities Appellate Tribunal, leading to delays and disruptions. The Securities Appellate Tribunal is a statutory body established under the provisions of Securities and Exchange Board of India or SEBI Act 1992. It hears and disposes appeals against orders passed by SEBI, Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority, and Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. A circular by Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India directed resolution professionals to share reports on insolvency applications with both debtors and creditors. Under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, the resolution professionals are required to submit a report to the adjudicating authority recommending approval or rejection of an application for initiating the insolvency resolution process. Prime Minister of India jointly inaugurated UPI services with Mauritius and Sri Lanka and also RuPay card services in Mauritius. This will further boost digital transformation, promote tourism and strengthen bilateral economies ties with both the countries. UPI powers multiple bank accounts into a single mobile application of any participating bank, merging several banking features. Transfer of fund is one example. The researchers have developed an early warning indicator for the breakdown of the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation or AMOC. It has been labeled as one of the tipping elements in the climate system. The AMOC is a large system of ocean currents that carry warm water from the tropics northwards into the North Atlantic, driven by differences in temperature and salt content. 6 forest staff members were suspended for being negligent in controlling teak smuggling in the Kaval Tiger Reserve. The Kaval Tiger Reserve is located in Telangana and in the southernmost tip of the central Indian tiger landscape, having linkages with Tadoba Andheri in Maharashtra and Indravati Tiger Reserves in Chhattisgarh. The Alaska health officials have confirmed first death from a recently discovered viral disease, Alaska pox. Alaska pox is a part of a family of viruses known as orthopox viruses, several of which are known to infect and cause diseases in humans. This double-stranded DNA virus comes from same genus as smallpox and cowpox. World Unani Day is celebrated every year on the 11th of February, marking the birth anniversary of the famous Indian Unani scholar Hakim Ajmal Khan. The Unani system of medicine is one of the oldest healthcare systems of the world, originating in Greece or Yunnan. CDOT and IIT Kharagpur signed an agreement to develop prototypes for 10 GB capable symmetric passive optical network, optical line terminal and optical network unit. This agreement was signed under the Telecom Technology Development Fund scheme. The scheme was launched by the Universal Service Obligation Fund under the Department of Telecommunications in 2022. Chhattisgarh's Osher Studio is helping in preservation of Dhokra Shilpkala. The Dhokra Shilpkala is a 4,000 years old intricate process of metal casting using lost wax technique, which is also known as Sire Perdue. The origins of the art can be traced to tribal communities residing in regions of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal and Odisha. Before we go, it's time to put your knowledge to test in today's segment of Test Your Learning. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of News Today. To get the answers to today's quiz and to download the PDF of News Today, make sure to check out the links in the description below.